Great to be here, and as an organic farmer, have this stage to tell a little bit more about organics, something we're very passionate about. But also because I believe organics sometimes, we can have an image about organics which, maybe is wrong, maybe is right, I don't know. But maybe to introduce myself first, I'm Ger-Jan Snippen, and I'm founder, co-owner and managing director of Biobras, an organic company in Holland. But above all, I'm an organic farmer. So basically my question to you is, do I look a little bit like an organic farmer? No, how does an organic farmer look? Overalls, yes? So that's your view, yeah. Any other opinions? Or what I brought with me is my grey woolly goat socks. I know that you're not all from Holland, but I brought them with me because it's a symbol. And I think in Holland, when you use the word organic, many people say it's the people, the grey woolly goat sock guys that are a little bit farming in a different way. So for me, it became almost an iconic thing. And I always wear it with me, but I wear it in my pocket. And I would like to explain a little bit why later on. So the idea was of this afternoon was to talk a little bit about organics, but maybe a little bit from a wider perspective. And by doing that, I would like to introduce a little bit our business. So just to show you a little bit how we went from, let's say, nothing to where the business is now. And then after that, take a little bit of wider perspective, which is more about feeding the world, because some people have challenged me about, is organic able to feed the world? And then conclude maybe a little bit of how, after a study I did by traveling the world a little bit and visiting a lot of farms, how I see a lot of potential for organics, but also maybe new food solutions in that way. But like I started in the introduction, I'm son of a conventional farmer in Holland. And I don't know if you're familiar with the farming system in Holland, but we had a dairy farm. And I wanted to become a farmer, but I didn't like milking cows. So my father said, well, I'm sorry, then you cannot become a farmer. So went to college, did university. And by coincidence, after I finished my studying, I got in contact with the organic. Well, I actually needed a job and was asked to start doing some organic trading, selling produce from Austria into the UK. And at that point, my feeling of organics was like the grey woolly goat sock guys. I never took the opportunity to have a look at their farms because I had an opinion. Was interested. I only had an opinion. But when I started trading in those products, I found out two things. First of all, there was demand for a product, which I never learned as a farmer's son because I always heard there's too much of everything. And if there's too much and you don't get your price, you go to Brussels. So that was a little bit where I came from. And the other thing was that I got in contact with those farmers that you could say started organics. And I found out that they were actually quite nice guys. They were, had different opinions and their farms looked a little bit different. But the fundament of what they were doing was quite right. So got involved in that. By coincidence, the family farm was sold and the family had to decide what are we going to do? And at that point, we decided to buy new land in Holland, convert the farm into organics. And I've got two brothers, one who likes milking cows, so he's doing the dairy side. I've got one who's growing the more arable crops, and I was left with the cauliflower, broccoli, and salads. So that's maybe sounds a bit like a nice family story about how a farm is developing. But the complicated thing about organic farming is the fundament of organic farming. And a lot of people that come to a farm, and if you ask them about, if we talk organics, what is organics? They tell me it's expensive, it doesn't look nice, and it's not spraying and not using fertilizers, for example. And that's probably true till a certain point. But they all forget the thing that we're passionate about, and that's crop rotation. Because crop rotation forms the fundament for organic farming. And if I mean crop rotation, it's about having a wide amount of crops that circulate over the fields over the years, and which all have a different effect on the soils. And that also sounds very easy because if one crop helps the other crop, of course, all the crops are healthy, and then you don't need chemical and fertilizers. So that all makes sense. But as a farmer, it's quite difficult because all of a sudden you have to grow all these crops. So that's what we did on our farm, and that's what my colleagues did. So at some point we found out that especially on the fresh produce, we were doing just not a good job because I was growing cauliflower, my colleague was growing cauliflower, and we're all doing a little bit, but we didn't have a focus point. So in 2005, we decided as 3 growers to join up with our fresh produce side and formed the company Biobras, which is a company that is growing cauliflower, broccoli, salads, which is a very demanding type of business because you have to be really connected in the supply chain to make it happen. So we thought if we are setting up this business, we can maybe speak to buyers directly and try to convince them also to put cauliflower and broccoli on the shelf. But on the other side, also try to be efficient and make the product work. Now, it was a nice idea, and I think we were a bit lucky because when we founded the business, at that time in the UK, there was an increasing demand for organics, 2006. And a large retailer in the UK decided to really reposition the shelves, and all of a sudden, we went from half pallet, not knowing where it went to, waiting too long in the cold store to find a customer, to full lorries, programmed supply, straight to the customer, in this case in England. So all of a sudden the farm also grew from a few hectares to 150 hectares of organic cauliflower, broccoli and salads. Now maybe what I learned most in that time was that as a farmer, maybe I was focusing too much about my dreaming about how big my tractor is and how many hectares I have and all these kind of things, instead of being active from what does the consumer want and how can I translate what we see on the shelves maybe back on my farm. In the meantime, we have developed the business a little bit further. So we transferred 50% of the volume now to Holland, 20% is still UK, and 20% is still is Scandinavia. So it's a more diversified model, you could say. So yeah, for me it sounds nice, and it's a nice business to be in. We work with about 100 people now, harvesting. We grow about 250 hectares in a crop rotation of 2,000 hectares. So we're growing the 4 shareholders now 2,000 hectares of organic land base, in which I'm responsible for 250 hectares of cauliflower, broccoli, and salad. So in that way, you know, we rotate the land so we can do that. But I was a little bit challenged. Yeah, no, oh, does it work? Because at some point I thought, oh well, this is great. So I have this nice farm, and it's all working, and you know, I'm very sustainable. So what I do is very good. But then, in 2012, I was asked by the Rabobank to join a Global Farmers Masterclass, and 50 growers of all the world gathered to discuss the theme, you could say, how to feed the world. And it's quite a big theme because there's a lot of scientists, I think, did a lot of work on it, and a lot of people have opinions about it. But to be very honest, although I travel a little bit, I was a little bit shocked about the bigger picture. Because yes, I am an organic farmer in Holland. Some people say I'm supplying a niche market, and then we need more food in the future at other places. So I was challenged, especially by Alt Dijkhuizen, who's chairman of the Wageningen University, who said to me, sustainability is all about producing more with less. And per definition, organic is not sustainable because you need more land base, more whatever, to produce the same amount of food. So me setting up a business, investing, and then somebody saying with all the political influential people on that table, saying that organic is not sustainable was for me quite of a shock. So I was maybe thinking too much of my own end. What I did to get a better view, I applied for a Nuffield scholarship. And a Nuffield scholarship means that you're able as a entrepreneur to travel the world for 6 weeks and just, you know, focus on a topic which is important for you. So it's not really a scientific research, but it's just the opportunity to be able to use the Nuffield network and, of course, also have some funds to travel the world. So I thought, why not go around the world and try to get the bigger picture about why farmers do what they do, and if it's really right that what I do is strange, you could say, in my part of the world. And it brought me to a lot of places, and I made a scheme to get a better view, and I first went to developing countries like Africa, for example. So I went to see farms in Mozambique. After that I went to Sweden and the UK because I wanted to also understand better why farmers are not following up on maybe demand from consumers. And I ended up traveling 3 weeks in Brazil because it's what we call a BRIC country, a very fast developing country, trying to understand how dependent we maybe become from products that come from those areas. And my main question was not to go to universities, get more data, but just go to a farmer and ask him the question. If you would not be dependent on the price that you get, if you would not be dependent on the economic models, how would you like to be a farmer? Just what do you think as a farmer is a common sense approach to your farm? And it's interesting because we visited the most intensive farms and very extensive farms, but I never heard farmers saying, I don't want to have a good crop rotation, for example, which is a different approach than if you ask him, is organic a good way of farming? Because he probably says, I need to be an intensive farmer and I need chemicals and fertilizers to be able to survive my farm. So if you give you an example, I went to Mozambique to see Koos, and Koos has an operation in Mozambique setting up a new farm, and his farm is called Mozambique Organicos. So I thought I was going to see this organic farm in Mozambique, and I thought it was almost paradise in Africa having an organic farm there. But when I arrived there, because Koos wanted to farm in an organic model, because he didn't want to be dependent on chemicals and fertilizers, when I came to see him and I worked for a week on his farm, I found out that he is using chemicals and fertilizers. So I asked Koos, what's happened? I mean, your philosophy is organics, and this is what you want to achieve, and now you're using chemicals and fertilizers. And he said, well, I'm forced to do that at the moment because I cannot grow enough crops, because Mozambique is a not very developed country. I cannot grow enough crops, so I need to grow only corn or other products to be able to get an income. So if I could grow more crops and market more crops, then the crops could help each other and I could do without chemicals and fertilizers. So for me, it stimulated very much the idea that I thought, so Koos doesn't necessarily want or needs to use those products, but because of the farm model it is at the moment, he's still reliable on those aspects. By the way, it's a fantastic place to go if you really want to see people fighting a challenge, then go to Mozambique and visit some farms over there, because it's a challenging country in all aspects, I guess. After Africa, we went to Sweden, for example, because maybe you are aware that especially in Scandinavia, organics is, there's a lot of demand for organics. And I thought, how is it possible that I export a lot of product to Scandinavia while there is a strong demand for those products? And what you hear then is that the growers don't follow up on the demand because there's a disconnection in the supply chain. So the retailer wants something or the consumer wants something, but the grower in some way doesn't trust it and he's not converting. So again, the possibility could be there, because if you speak to a farmer, he's not like, I don't like it, but for some reason he's not following up on something where the demand is for. And you can see the same in Holland a little bit, but especially in the UK also, where we especially like to produce what we always have done instead of maybe trying to find new ways. And then the mind-blowing Brazil, because Brazil is a large country, so you can see agriculture from, you could say, one end to the other end of development. But I was especially interested in Brazil because if you look at all those facts and all those data, one of the things that I picked out was that we will be about 40% reliable on protein resource from Brazil in the future. So I thought, let's go and find out what they're doing there, and also to understand why all the Dutch dairy farmers are building huge sheds for new cows, being in the future being dependent, for example, on protein resource from those countries. And if you travel around, you also, as an organic farmer, get a totally different approach, because GMO, for example, is a hot topic, of course, especially in organics. Is GMO good? Is it not good? What do we do with it? But once you sit down with a grower in Brazil on his farm and you see his challenges over there, it helps you to mirror almost your own view about the way they farm. But again, the same thing happened. If you look at the way the farms are being set up there and the intensive way they farm now, they can also not fight all the issues they have only with GMO or with chemicals in the future. So they also need to work to get crop rotation in place. So for me, if I put it all together, traveling around gave me a good view on mirroring my own model, so see where the weaknesses are as an organic farmer, because also organic farming is not like it's finished or something. It's just a way of trying to get closer to the forest where we all once lived in, because also organic farming is a model, but it at least helped me to get some new inputs for the farm. Now, in a few things that I took out of it, and I would like to share with you, maybe to get a an easier access or a better approach to, you could say, a more balanced, what I call a smarter food system, are actually three things. So the biggest thing I picked out, there's so much possible if you connect in the supply chain. I'm now able to work more direct with my customers, or even sometimes with the customers of my customers. So if you look at retailers and you get involved in what consumers want, and we heard this morning at the breakfast panel also some input from that, there is a certain demand for things. But if I'm on my island and the consumer or my retailers are at that island and we're not connected, I start complaining about them and they start complaining about me that I'm not innovative or bring up new solutions. So we've seen our business being successful because we got connected in the supply chain, but also to try to get that trust. And maybe sometimes it sounds a bit easy, but it's something that you need to work on. And I think agriculture has not been the best partner in the supply chain because many times we just like to do what we do. But we need to connect in that supply chain. So if I see what it did with us, it's really finding the balance between having what I call a common sense farming model, and for me that's organic, because for me it makes sense the way I do what I do, and combine that with bringing volume and efficiency, because that's what we needed in organics. The idea is right, crop rotation, but we needed to develop a business like we've done with Biobrass to bring volume and efficiency in so that we can also make it work, because otherwise I have a fantastic story about organics, but I'm not able to supply a larger public. And the other thing is to try to understand better and also connect better with the end consumer and basically see if we can either share something that are challenges for us or bring some of the desire that is there with the consumers back to my farm. So that's what I've experienced as almost the biggest step and the most important part for developing, but also making organic more realistic for the future. But it also is asking sometimes for an honest approach to maybe what we eat. And as many people say, the world is getting more transparent. The food supply chain is becoming more transparent, but it's giving us also the opportunity to share more why maybe some crops or some products are healthy or not healthy, or have a certain demand or a certain pressure on the way we produce food. And what I see is that we have a lot of vegetables. So if I don't want to be dependent on chemicals and fertilizers and I'm in Northern Europe, maybe I first should go back to what my grandfather was growing, because he didn't have fertilizers and chemicals. So which crops are nicely and easy to grow, for example, in our hemisphere? So maybe our food habit is a little bit being steered towards a model where we are growing or asking for crops which are maybe not even easy to grow here, for example, because of blight problems, fungicides, etc. So why not look back to the crops that we used to grow? So for us, as a business, beetroot has been one of those products. It's a crop that is well positioned in our crop rotation. It grows easy. It doesn't need so much nutrients. But then if I go to that consumer side, which I just spoke about, all of a sudden the consumer says, yeah, but I don't want to eat beetroot all the time, or I don't want to cook it so long. So the question is, how do you make that easy again? So for us, it's been a step, for example, to say, okay, why don't we add some convenience to that product? So why not reinvent those products? And parsnips, for example, is also one of those products. So look more at the traditional products that we were growing and which are well suited in our climate, and try to see if you can reinvent them almost and try to take people on the journey. And the good thing about this, and that's I think what we also heard this morning in the breakfast panel, by doing that, it's also possible to create value and bring value back in the supply chain. And I think bringing value back in the supply chain is an important part of valuing food again, and also prevent food waste. Because if I buy something which is valuable to me, I don't throw it away. So, by creating quality products which have value, it's better for us. You need less input. But on the other side, also, everybody in the supply chain becomes a bit more happy about it again. But of course, that's all very nice to do. But if I cannot get that message across, why should people follow? So it's not easy for a farmer to invest in marketing. So we're used to invest in tractors and machinery, and the bigger the better. And you can calculate your depreciation, so that's all fine. But maybe we should invest more in trying to tell our stories. Because there's one partner in the supply chain who has a story, then it's, you could say, the farmers or the growers, because we have true stories. And I say more and more, and I hope you recognize it, because otherwise my theory is a bit mistaken, is that true stories are attractive. Because the time of brands is a little bit gone. Brands is something you make up, and then we have this image, and then we buy it because, you know, it's the brand or it's the marketing budget behind. Actually, as a farmer, I don't need a brand. I don't need so much investment because I've got a true story, and it's I think a story that should attract all of us. But the problem is we're not very good in telling it or sharing it. So what I see more and more is that if we are able to pass over our true stories, and we can create desire for that, either by, you know, making nicer products or just having it, we can be on the journey together. And I think it's very valuable because I think we can all bring up examples for ourselves of stuff that we really like because there's a good story behind. So inspiration has become a very important part of it. So in our business, we have set up a visitor center. And at the visitor center, we meet buyers, category managers, we meet consumers, we meet policymakers, and all those people together, you know, by sitting there together, by enjoying a nice meal or walking through our trial field where we explain what we do, all of a sudden we have a different view on what organics was. And the funny thing is, not everybody says organic is a solution, but all of a sudden we have a different debate than only talking about, you know, it's a little bit anthroposophic, it's not possible, we cannot feed the world in that way. So all of a sudden we are becoming open-minded again about finding solutions. And I must say, on the other side, also as a grower, I'm challenged many times that I think, oh, I should invest in better things, because also even in my farming system, there are some weaknesses that I have to pick up in a better way. And it's fun as well, isn't it? To sit down with people, have a nice meal. So it's a good part. So you're all very welcome to join our farm at some times, because a few years ago I always had to make my sandwiches in the morning, but now we have so many visitors on site that every time there's somebody coming visiting, and at least we can have lunch together. So I hope you feel that I'm passionate about organics, not only because it's my business, but I see it also as a good tool going forward. And if I then make a little bit step back about the alternative, so what's the alternative? And then I go back to the comment that was made about, it's wrong. You know, organic is wrong because we need to produce more with less. More volume to feed the world. And I found out two things. If I speak to growers and we need to produce more and you look at the tools, there's not only that value side that you can doubt, the other thing is that we are becoming more and more dependent on large suppliers from input. Because my farming model is very independent. I don't need fertilizers, I don't need chemicals, so I don't rely on large companies which might steer our food system in the future, because it's almost a closed cycle now. And if you look at growers that are saying, well, look at the Brazilian guys with the soybeans having issues now with white rust. They're reliable on GMO seeds from large companies that we all know, or they are relying on chemicals and fertilizers, which is becoming more expensive. So, you know, what's the other side? Also for a farmer, I think, as a farmer, I would like to be at the independent side. So for me, on one side, you know, being able to deliver something that the consumer is waiting for, and on the other side, having an independent farming model. But maybe most important, also just have fun in what we do. So that's a little bit how we came to this title of the presentation, you could say. Have fun. I hope you feel that I'm not doing something that I need to do, but I really like what we do because we add to something. We create value. We've built a business from zero to where we are now. So we have been able to make a point of difference. And I actually do think we have a chance of playing an important part of feeding the world. But then only in the context of, you know, balancing the way we produce with probably what we eat.